this is one of the dumbest people I have ever seen talking in public. This is Chris Cillizza with CNN. And he is going over the New York Times. I think it was the Times. I might have that wrong. I think it was the Times that put out 11 potential 2024 candidates in the Democratic Party if Joe Biden does not run. So they're already doing the horse race bullshit. And that is egregious in and of itself, right? To draw leverage and capital away from other issues and use your influence to draw attention back to this horse race is in and of itself problematic. But what's embarrassing about this is how ridiculous the segment is and how out of touch these media elites are about politics in this country. Just for the record, in 2020, Chris Cillizza's picks included Kamala Harris #1. She didn't even make it to Iowa. To give him a tiny bit of credit, he had Joe Biden #2. But to be fair, the whole media infrastructure had to kick into gear to ensure that Biden won. So he had Kamala 1, Biden 2. Then he had Beto O'Rourke 3rd. Okay. I don't remember who was 4, maybe Elizabeth Warren. Then he had Cory Booker before Bernie Sanders. So this guy has no fucking idea what he's talking about, even when it comes to patently obvious rudimentary things. And yet this is an industry, by the way, you guys, political commentary. It's an industry where you can be wrong every time and continue to be treated as an expert and platformed by these big networks like CNN. So I apologize for forcing you all to watch this, but this is Chris Cillizza giving a secondhand embarrassment type of presentation about the 11 Democrats that he and the New York Times and the mainstream elite seem to think may have a chance to win in 2024.
Let's go through the 11 names floated by the Times as 2024 Democratic contenders and go through their strengths and their weaknesses. Kamala Harris. Asked by the Wall Street Journal recently whether she thought Joe Biden would be running again, the vice president said this, quote, "I'll be very honest, I don't think about it, nor have we talked about it," end quote. Which, well, that can't be true. While Harris has undoubtedly struggled as vice president, she's still the most likely Democrat not named Joe Biden to wind up as the party's nominee in 2024, thanks to not just her name identification advantage over the rest of the field, but also her demonstrated polling strength among black voters, a critical Democratic constituency. Pete Buttigieg, he, to me, seemed to be the most naturally talented candidate in the 2020 field. Mayor Pete, who is now the Secretary of Transportation, has also been front and center selling Joe Biden's infrastructure bill, a popular piece of legislation to have your name attached to. And yet, polling shows that problem with support in the all-important black community that plagued him in 2020 doesn't appear to have improved much, if at all. And that's a big problem. Elizabeth Warren. The Massachusetts senator is still popular among liberals and wouldn't be splitting the vote with Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders this time around like she did in 2020, given that we don't expect Sanders to make a third run for president. But Warren hasn't expressed much interest in a return bid of her own and said earlier this year that she plans to run for re-election to the Senate in 2024. That said, her response about Biden to the Times, quote, "He's running, I expect to support him and help him get reelected. I'm sticking with that story," end quote, did raise some eyebrows raised. Amy Klobuchar. Other than Buttigieg, I thought the Minnesota senator came out of the 2020 campaign looking the best. And her Midwest roots are always a plus given what we expect the electoral map to be. Klobuchar campaigned in Virginia this year with former Governor Terry McAuliffe and is doing very little to knock down talk that she's interested in a re-run. Roy Cooper. Term limited out of office in 2024, the North Carolina governor has ample time to consider his next step, starting with his service as the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association in 2022. Hailing from what will likely be a swing state in the next presidential election could be a major argument in Cooper's favor. But it's a very open question as to someone with as moderate a governing record as Cooper could win a Democratic presidential primary. Mitch Landrieu. Landrieu is tasked with dispersing the hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure funds approved by Congress earlier this year. Being tasked with implementing the infrastructure bill is a big and high-profile job that the former New Orleans mayor has taken to with relish. Delicious on a hot dog. And it's a very good job to build goodwill with key Democratic constituencies, too. Going from that job to a White House run might seem like a stretch, but remember that Buttigieg's past experience prior to running in 2020 was as mayor of South Bend, Indiana. And New Orleans is a heck of a lot bigger in terms of population than South Bend. Gina Raimondo. So Raimondo made the leap from Rhode Island governor to Biden administration commerce secretary. But, as with Roy Cooper, doubts remain as to whether she is too moderate to win a Democratic primary. She's also not all that well known. Gretchen Whitmer. The Michigan governor needs to win what could be a tough re-election race next year before she can turn to considering a national run in earnest. But if she does win in 2022, Whitmer will have a demonstrated appeal in what could be one of the swingiest states in 2024, a not insignificant feather in her cap. What happened to my cap? Phil Murphy. The record of New Jersey governors running for president isn't great of late. Sorry, Chris Christie. And Murphy did just win a second term by a much smaller margin than most analysts expected. The important thing, though, is that he won, and he can use the next few years of his governorship as a policy and political testing ground. J.B. Pritzker. Pritzker has two things going for him. One, he's the governor of a major Democratic Midwestern state, Illinois. And two, he's very, very rich. Like Whitmer, Pritzker needs to get reelected in 2022 before even considering 2024. But unlike Whitmer, Pritzker sits in a decidedly Democratic state and is a clear favorite. Stacey Abrams. So Abrams talked openly about running for president in 2020 before ultimately passing on the race. This time she needs to win the Georgia governor's mansion in 2022 before thinking too much about 2024. And that is not going to be an easy or cheap task.
Where do you even start with this one, you guys? I mean, honestly, the whole video I'm sitting here like frantically taking, that's wrong, that's ridiculous. So you come up with a list of 11 people for 2024 and like 6 or 7 of them nobody has ever even heard of. This is their idea of it's. Where do you even start with this one? So he starts off with the Liz Bernie thing was what first caught my attention. He assumes Elizabeth Warren. Notice he even like says it out loud. He assumes Elizabeth Warren is going to run, even though she said she's not, that she's going to run again for the Senate instead. So he assumes she'll run, at the same time assumes Bernie won't. Now, I'm not suggesting I think Bernie's going to run again, but just notice how automatic the establishment reflex is, right? To oh no, well, she won't have to deal with Bernie this time. You know, just outrageous. Okay, just outrageous. And then he says that Pete is the most talented politician of the bunch. Based on what? Based on being the most robotic? Based on sounding the most like Bill Clinton? What are you talking about? That, you know, just again, he just, you guys, they sit in a room, these establishment fucking media idiots. They sit in a room and smell their own farts and laugh and it's so insane. He's just taking what he hears from DC and regurgitating it as though it is reporting or media or commentary or original or in any other way worthy of people's fucking time. Then he says of Amy Klobuchar that he thought she came out the best from last cycle. What? She couldn't get any traction at all. All she ever did was humiliate herself with her pathetic attempt to make jokes about Donald Trump's hair. What are you even talking about? And then it came out that she didn't prosecute Chauvin when he was part of a previous murder. She could have saved George Floyd's life potentially by putting Chauvin in jail earlier or getting him off the force earlier. She refused to. When she was, by the way, Attorney General in Minnesota, before she was a senator. So anyway, that came out right after the election cycle. Chris Cillizza is like, yeah, no, she seems great. I thought she came out better than anybody. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? This is, you guys, this is why the media is such a laughing stock. This is why. And then he goes on to list like 6 names, and I'm like, who the fuck is that? I don't know. Roy Cooper. People in North Carolina don't know fucking Roy Cooper. Oh my God, it drives me so batshit. But this is the kind of stuff, you guys, that will get that will have been viewed millions and millions of times, and then people just assume that because it's CNN and Cillizza and the New York Times that must be credible and that must really be what's going to happen. So it's this like they speak it into existence and they start 2 years ahead of time. You know, There's nothing to back up his analysis there whatsoever. Nothing to back up the New York Times analysis there whatsoever. By the way, the New York Times, you know who they picked going into the primary last time to win the Democratic nomination? They picked Beto O'Rourke and Amy Klobuchar. Okay? Your credibility should be shot right there. Done. You know, no listening to you anymore, you fucking idiot. It's the only industry, you guys, where you can just be wrong your entire career and continue to be treated like an expert and continue to be platformed on the New York Times or CNN. Professional wrong people are treated as experts in this fucking field. It's just beyond insane. And unfortunately, it really does create, to whatever extent, you guys, electoral politics could be valuable, to whatever extent it's a tool that we could utilize, that is crippled by this kind of media influence, and that people listen to people like Chris Cillizza, that people sitting at home think that all sounded reasonable. And this, by the way, this is why YouTube has to boost algorithms for CNN compared to other independent sources. I might get a few hundred views on this live stream. He got millions on that, I guarantee you. Not on YouTube, but between them showing it on the network and the hundreds of thousands I'm sure it got on YouTube and whatever else, it's that influences opinions. And then that leads to both the establishment mentality of we have to vote lesser evil. And it also, by the way, it leads to the complete and total sort of, I'm blanking on the word I'm looking for. Like the lefties just retreating from the whole process because they feel disenfranchised, right? When they see that garbage for 2 straight years going into an election, it starts to feel helpless. So the establishment gets to benefit on both sides of this. People participating in elections are convinced to vote lesser evil and to stick with the establishment and listen to the establishment sources. And people who may have otherwise voted for an outside candidate are often just turned off from electoral politics entirely. So they get to win on both fronts, right? So anyway, like I said, I debated covering that because I didn't even want to fucking platform that moron. But at the same time, it's worth pointing out how problematic that kind of garbage content is. And unfortunately how influential it can be. So, if you're listening to Chris Cillizza, go see a doctor. The guy has no fucking idea what he's talking about. And that is exactly why he gets to keep his job. That's not like a mistake on CNN's behalf. What they want is mouthpieces for power. They want people to get up there and play stenographer for the DC elite. And that is exactly what Chris Cillizza does. And you just saw it there. So, anyhow, apologies for bringing you that horrendous clip, but I felt the need to explain how problematic it is.